Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Today, we're going to talk about my top 20 fantasy books that I read in 2024. So this should be fun. As usual, I do have slides. I'm going to give it a minute to show up over on YouTube. And not all of these books came out in 2024, although some of them did. And I'm going to go in order from number 20 up to number 1, ending with my favorite fantasy book of the year. So let's do this. It should be fun. Hello, hello. It has been a week, y'all. Kid was homesick. Now my other kid is homesick. Stuff is going around. So stay safe out there. And if you're in the LA area, definitely stay safe. It's been rough. I know people have had to evacuate. Hey, Jenna. Okay. Hello. So, top 20 fantasy books that I read in 2024. Beginning with number 20, this is The City of Stardust by Georgia Summers. I didn't see a ton of people talking about this one, but I really liked it. It was very whimsical, had some sort of dark academia vibes, dark fantasy, or not dark fantasy, dark academia, kind of a portal fantasy element to it. And I liked it. It had mysterious elements. I want to read more from this author. I feel like a lot of people would probably enjoy this. Okay, cool. Enjoyed City of Stardust. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was really good, but I didn't see a lot of people talking about it. Yes, it is flu season. Stay safe. Absolutely. So this was number 20. Coming in at number 19 is Air by Sabaa Tahir. This is a um, sequel, sort of, to the Ember and the Ashes series. It's set quite a number of years in the future, following a new generation of characters. What's really fun about this is you do get to see favorite characters from the Ember and the Ashes series as adults. And this one I would say is a little more heavily leaning romance than the Ember and the Ashes series did, but it's not fully a fantasy romance. But I really liked it a lot. I think it's doing some interesting things, and we get a little bit of a wider look at the world. So yeah, would recommend. I don't know if this was for Air or City of Stardust, but love that. Hello. Hey, Jessica. Hi, Lurky Duck. Enjoyed Air. Awesome. Yes, Air is great. It is, yeah, it's not a prequel. It is a sequel sort of spin-off. Yep. Which is fun. It's fun to see those characters playing more parental roles. It's kind of cool. Number 18 was The Broken Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. I This was my favorite book in this series. This is not my favorite series from her personally, but I really liked the main character in this book. They are companion novels that do sort of tie together by the end of book 3. And then there's also a novella that I read with it. I love N.K. Jemisin. This is probably her most traditionally fantasy book to a certain extent. It's got the trope of kind of gods walking among us, but with some interesting twists to it. And the main character, whose perspective we're in for the Broken Kingdoms, is this blind woman with magical abilities. And I liked it a lot. I thought it was really interesting. Hey, Beth, Happy New Year. Coming in at number 17 is Sunder by Kirsten Hall. This I'm calling fantasy, but it has some kind of sci-fi elements to it. It's, oh, I like, what do I even say about this? It's very twisty and it takes you on a journey. And I loved it. By the end, I was like, oh my gosh, what happened was wild. It's follows this woman who has given up her soul sort of to have some magical abilities to try to survive. And she ends up getting into some trouble when she accidentally like attaches herself to the soul of another person and has to try to figure out if she can disentangle them. But she ends up drawn into this web of politics and religious fanaticism and all of these interesting things happening. It is a journey and it is really good. Kept me on the edge of my seat. Yes. 100,000 Kingdoms was really interesting, and the rest of the books are different but also interesting. Number 16 for me was The City of Dragons by Robin Hobb. This is book 3 in the Rainwild Chronicles. I love Robin Hobb. She's definitely one of my favorite authors. This was my favorite book in this series, which I think is an unpopular opinion. I often really like the books that are most focused on politics and interpersonal relationships and what's going on with different characters. And this is also kind of cool because we're discovering some interesting things about this ancient city of dragons, the titular city of dragons. And I just thought some of the world building stuff was really cool. I loved this. I love all of her books, but this was the one that made it to my best of fantasy list for the year, as I am making my way through the realm of the Elderlings. I have one series left to read this year and I'll be done, which is wild. Number 15 is a cozy fantasy romance. This is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. I loved this. It is a debut. Another one I didn't see a ton of people talking about, but it's a quieter, kind of cozier book that is just really well executed. It's about a super shy young woman who is the keeper of phoenixes in a zoo for magical animals. And she is bisexual, so there is like a sapphic element to it, but she is so awkward, but you see her kind of grow and come into her own and find her voice, and it's so lovely. And the other thing that I thought was really cool about this with the world building is she writes about the zoo and the caretaking of all of these animals in a way that makes you feel like, oh yeah, obviously this is how you would care for this magical creature is from a scientific perspective. It's pretty amazing. I feel like she nailed it. I was a fan. Yes, Phoenix Keeper was great. Yeah, I really recommend this. Yeah, not everybody likes the Rainwild Chronicles, which I think is interesting. I suspect part of it is because it's it's a may I mean, all of her books do this, but it's maybe a little more focused on female characters and interpersonal relationships than her other series, but her other series have them too. So I find it really interesting that this is the series that people like to have feelings about. It is not my favorite series from her, but I still think it's really good. Yeah, it's a great cover. It's really good. I hope we get more from her. Honestly, I would love to get more books in this world because I think the way that she writes about these magical creatures and the zookeeping and stuff is really neat, and I would love to get perspectives from other other characters who are working there. We'll see. It was a debut. Number 14 was a big surprise to me. I didn't know what to expect from this. This is the volume 1 of Thunderworld, The Extraordinary Disappointments of Leopold Berry by Ransom Riggs. He's the author of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and this is his first book in a new series that is sci fantasy. It's kind of a mix, but I put it in fantasy and I ended up loving it. I thought this was so great. I don't know if this is everybody's thing, but I personally have always loved stuff that's like there's a city and then there's a magical secret underworld that is coexisting with that city and adventures there. And that's what's happening here. And I love it. It's set in Los Angeles, but there's a magical world existing sort of parallel to Los Angeles, and it's quirky and delightful. The main character is this very average boy who wants to be great, but is average and makes a lot of mistakes, and I feel like he's very relatable, and I liked it a lot. It also deals with complicated family relationships, deals with grief. I just thoroughly enjoyed this. I loved it so much more than I think I expected to, and I feel like if I had read this as a teenager, I would have made this my personality because I love the world he's creating so much. I thought it was really cool. So I intend to read book 2 when it comes out. Number 13 was Kushis Avatar by Jacqueline Carey. This year I last year, Kushil's Dart, I finally read, and that was on my list of best fantasy I had read. This year, I finished the trilogy, and this was my favorite of the two other books. These are so good. I had forgotten how much I love what fantasy used to do. I don't feel like you get this as much anymore, but each of these books feels like a complete story in one book that today I feel like would be divided up into a trilogy or something, and it's not. So they're all following similar characters and they're set in the same world, but each book feels like a full encapsulated story with like a beginning, middle, and end that's really satisfying. The level of world building and character work and court politics is so good, and I just was really impressed. So I liked this a lot. Definitely a classic for a reason. Number 12 is The Brides of High Hill by Niveau. This is a novella that I really liked. It is a gothic fantasy take. It's a part of a novella series that I love. And I think what's fun about the series is that each novella follows the same character, Cleric Chi, who collects stories in this sort of Asian inspired fantasy world, and but each novella is sort of a different genre or a different take on storytelling, and this one is a gothic. And as someone who loves the gothic, I thought this was just beautifully executed, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I'm a huge fan of Nevo. I mean, like, I read whatever she comes out with. It's great. Number 11 is Masquerade by Oo Sengoyomi. This is one I would love to see more people pick up because it was so good. This is a very low magic fantasy, so don't expect a lot of magic coming out of it, but it is a Hades and Persephone retelling that is not a romance. It is a West African inspired political fantasy about a woman who is kidnapped to be a bride to a king. And it is a retelling, except that it is about her retaking her autonomy and finding her own way to power in this very dangerous political court. And it is brutal and great. Highly recommend. I would love to see more people read this. Really good. I agree. Yes, Singing Hill series is great, has only gotten better. And yeah, you can never go wrong with Nevo. I agree with this. Okay, I I've heard mixed things about the second trilogy by Jacqueline Carey, but maybe I need to try them. They're so long, but they've been really good so far, so I probably should try more from her. Coming in at number 10, oh, this was good, like dark in a delicious sort of way. Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. This is a dark queer political fantasy that is a debut, and it's got blood magic and sort of vampires and follows three characters. It's really messy, it's really dark. There's political coups, there's lots of twists. There's romance, but it's messy as hell. And like won't necessarily have a happily ever after. I loved it. It also has villainous female characters that are great. So if you like a good, morally gray at best set of characters in your dark, bloody, sexy fantasy, I would recommend this one. It's great. It's really smart. Number 9 is my other Niveau, The City in Glass. This is beautiful. This was her pandemic book. I got to interview her about it, which was so great. I had so much fun talking to her. And I loved this, but it is different from her other books. This is slow paced. It feels like literary fantasy. It's really looking at a city over long time scales from the perspective of a demon who is tied to that city. And so it's about cycles of life and death and destruction and rebirth and humanity through the process. And like, what are the things that persist in a city and what are the things that change in a city? It's lovely, not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I really liked it. I thought it was beautiful. Number 8 is an anthology. This is January's Stories of Love, Magic, and Betrayal by Olivia Blake. This is a collection of short stories that are sci fi, fantasy, mythology, some with a more romantic bent, some darker ones, and they're separated into seasons. So winter, spring, summer, fall, and I think it's really interesting the way that the stories fit into the seasons. There are some amazing stories in here that I'm still thinking about, so I loved this. I thought it was great. And if you've been wanting to try Olivia Blake, but you don't necessarily want to dive into like a whole series, this might be a good way to taste test her because I feel like you get an idea of the range of her writing ability, which can be nice, especially if you like short stories. Number 7 is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This has a strong romantic elements, but I still feel like it fits as a fantasy rather than in my romance category, which is why I'm putting it here. But this was a very, very well written um, YA romantic fantasy with true enemies to lovers happening. It's they are political enemies, right? So he is quite literally hunting her. She is part of a magical group of people that are outlawed and are supposed to be put to death, and she is running a un like a rebellion type organization, sort of, and is a figurehead of it, and the guy is trying to hunt her, but she's also pretending to be a noblewoman, and so there's a romantic element, but they're truly enemies, there's twists, it's paced really well, and I'm excited to read book 2. It's just a duology, so I think it's gonna be really good. Yeah, this was so good. Really well done. Number 6 was so fun. I read this towards the end of the year, The Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. I need to pick up book 2. This was great if you like messy melodrama. It's sort of like The Bachelor in a fantasy world with some Hunger Games thrown in. We've got a human girl who is plucked out of a prison and put into these deadly trials to win the hand of a Fey King. She's the only human competing. And, it's all of this like messy, petty drama. It's sexy. And there's some twists, and it's a lot of fun. It's very fast paced. I had a blast reading it. Definitely recommend. And it is on Kindle Unlimited if you're interested. I think at least the first couple books are on Kindle Unlimited. Yay! Starting at the end of the month after readathon books. Love it. Yeah, this was fun. Number 5 was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This was a big surprise for me. I had read Six of Crows twice and liked it, but I'm not a big heist story person, so I kept putting this off. And I finally was like, okay, let me like finish the series. So I finished it and I was like, oh, why did I wait? This is so good. This might be my favorite thing I've ever read from her because the level of character work is so good, and it's not so much of a heist story, although there are twisty elements to it. It's a lot more focused on like the city politics, on the characters. I love also the way that she just seamlessly weaves in so much diversity to her characters that feels natural. There's queer characters and disabled characters. One of the characters in this has dyslexia, and it's doesn't feel like we're doing check boxes or it's like forced in. It just feels natural to the story, but it's so deep. Her character work is like so good, top notch. Loved it. Hello, hello. Yeah, I mean, although I'm really sad the Netflix show got canceled after 2 seasons because the show was so good. This was the picture that I found to put on here, but yeah. Um, okay. Number 4, controversial, I know, but Immortal Dark by Tigas Girma. I loved this. Love me a gothic romantic vampire horror thing, and that's with dark academia. That's kind of the situation we're getting here. We've got black vampires, we've got again true enemies to lovers sort of. It was just really good, really dark, delicious, um upper YA to adult crossover, I feel like, but I thought this was so well done. And it's a debut. One of the better debuts I read this year. Really good. Yeah, I know. I wanted more of the characters too. The Netflix show for Shadow and Bone was so good. Speaking of shows, Immortal Dark would make a hella good show if somebody picks it up. I would be very excited about that. Number 3 is The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. This is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty series, and so, like, how do you even talk about this, right? So this whole series is this epic following multiple generations of this political dynasty in an Asian-inspired fantasy world, and there's so many layers to it, like, there's the characters, and there's the world, and there's the politics, and there's the way he talks about, machinery of war, and it's so smart, but the character work is so good, and the female characters are interesting and complicated and have their own reasons for being and goals and ambitions and are not there. I don't know. I'm always impressed when male fantasy authors can write women like this. I think he does a really good job. I I I don't know what else to tell you about this, but it's really good. It is long, and the first book was a lot to get through. I feel like the first half of the first book is a lot of setup. It's a little dry, but it definitely pays off in the end. I recommend it. And I need to finish the series this year. Liked Immortal Dark 2. Yay. No, I don't think so. No, what there is another duology that takes place after Six of Crows. It's set in the same world, but it is part of a separate but related series. There are like 3 different series that tie together for that, but no, Six of Crows is just a duology. All right. Number 2 is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This is another one that I debated. But while there is a romance, I would say this is primarily a fantasy, and it is a cozy fantasy, and I loved it so much. Also, the cover, like, it's so beautiful. This book made me so happy. It is cozy, but in a way where there's still a plot and stakes that might work better for people who need something with a little more than some cozy fantasy has. So this follows a woman who is a librarian for magical tomes fleeing a political coup with stolen forbidden magical tomes so they won't be destroyed. And she flees to the little island that she grew up on and is in this cottage and starts a jam shop as a cover for the fact that she has these magical books. Uh, and it's delightful. She has a companion who is a sentient spider plant. She has like a slow burn romance with her childhood friend who she meets again. There are mermaids. It's delightful. It's so good. I loved it a lot. Yay! I love that it was one of your favorites as well. That's awesome. Oh, thank you. Yes, Rule of Wolves is the second duology after Six of Crows. Yay! Yes, read Spell Shop. It's so good. Yes! I love this. Picked it up in December at a convention. I know, a cozy amongst the epics. It's true. Like, and I love both. I have range in my fantasy reading. I loved it. Yeah, it's wonderful. I will say, however, like my favorite fantasy of the year is one that I guess would be approved by the fantasy bros. This might not be. I don't really care because I loved it. It's amazing. But best fantasy I read this year was The Will of the Many. I mean, the hype on this is real by James Islington. I think it's hilarious that I didn't realize until after I bought it that this edition has quotes from 2 fantasy dude booktubers on the cover. Daniel Green, the best fantasy of 2023. And Petrick says, number 1 fantasy of the year. I agree. I think this is excellent fantasy, but also it is accessibly written. It's deceptively accessible, I would say, because it's written in a way that it's super easy to read. Like Brandon Sanderson, I think also is really accessible in terms of the actual prose itself and the ability to read it. This, I think, is even easier than Sanderson because it doesn't spend quite as much time on detail that may or may not be necessary. It's a little more tightly paced than some of Sanderson's stuff, even though I enjoy Sanderson. Um, but I think you can see the inspiration to what he wrote. This is following a young man who is supposedly an orphan. Well, he is an orphan living in an orphanage and hiding because he is secretly the last surviving member of a royal family that was colonized and overthrown, and his family was all killed. He is then adopted by a nobleman who wants to enroll him in this elite academy and has reasons of his own. So he is dealing with like his own identity. He's dealing with like his adoptive father who has stuff he wants to do, and he's being manipulated by this rebel organization. And there are twists and turns and mysteries. It's fantasy with sci-fi elements, and it is so good. And it's got this ending that is wild. Absolutely love. Love this. Can't wait for book 2. It's so good. Yeah. Have heard of this. This is the new special edition cover. The original one looked different. I have this one and I like it better, but people disagree about that. But yeah, I loved this book too. I read at least one fantasy for the guys, girls, gays, and theys. Truer words. It's true. My fantasy reading has range. But I am obsessed. This is one that I could see being a long-term favorite that I would return to. I really loved it. I think it's great. Hate that you have the old cover and the new book will oh, I know. Well, you'll have to maybe get the new one. I know. It sucks when they change covers, but I do like the new covers better personally. It's just me, but I like this. Yeah, really good. So there you go. Those are the 20 best fantasy books that I read in 2024. And I think there were a lot of really good ones across a wide range of subgenres. So hopefully there's a little bit of something for everybody. The cover makes it a book you want to read. The other cover, yes, I agree with this. The other cover does look more like lit fic, and I will say that it was when I saw this cover that I finally was like, okay, let me pre-order this and actually read it. Yeah, the cover does give a glimpse of how the world looks like, and I like that as well. Yeah, it was a really good one. So, well, that was short and sweet. Yeah, the other cover, because it does. It's like historical fiction or lit fic or something that's just got the pillars on it. It's kind of boring. I do think that this is a better cover personally, so I'm glad they made the switch. But there you go. Thanks for hanging out. We went through that pretty quick. Yeah, it was really fun. Looked it up and it doesn't look like fantasy, right? Right? Things to come that you might want to know about. I'm doing a really fun live stream Tuesday night with friends. So Jess Owens and Izzy from Happy for Now are going to join me, and we're going to do a live version of a try a chapter tag. If you haven't seen these before, this is where, and we're doing this we're doing with books on our TBRs that we're like not sure are going to be for us, to hopefully pare down our TBRs a little bit. So we're going to do reading sprints while we try the first few chapters of each book, and then we'll discuss. So if you want to hang out with us live, you can do it with us. But also if you want to hear our commentary on the books that we're bringing, it should be a good time. So that's coming Tuesday night. And then I still have other stuff coming. So you can expect my top horror books of the year coming soon. And then probably the next one after that will be top romance. And then later on, you'll get mystery thrillers and best science fiction and some stats. So all of that is coming later in the month. And yeah, I think it's going to be fun Tuesday. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you all for joining, and I will see you next time. Have a great weekend.